Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
This was a big reason why you left the corporate law field.
Yeah. I mean, there was pressure to drink. Like, it was tough. It got to a point where, like, everyone kind of knew that I didn't drink, which was good. I did drink a little because, like, sometimes I would just have something to sip on to, like, not have to deal with the, like, comments. But that definitely had an impact in building relationships with my coworkers, which was unfortunate. And maybe if I was a different person and I didn't drink, then maybe it wouldn't have. But for me, it did.
Hey everyone, this is Meredith. You're listening to the Afternoon Snack podcast. On today's episode, we are doing a very highly requested topic, one that we've been thinking about doing for a long time, and we're going to talk about alcohol. Obviously, this is something that a number of podcasters and scientists have discussed. So we wanted to figure out, how do we add, a unique angle and a unique element? So we get into a little of the science and how it works and what it does to your body. We talk about our personal philosophies on it and how we see it show up and work for our clients and the people who we work with. And then we talk a little bit about the industry itself and the policy and kind of what goes on behind the scenes that influences the way that people live with and interact with alcohol on a daily basis. So there's a lot to talk about and we cover a lot. So yeah, we hope that you enjoy it. Well, it continues to be a week. We've been saying that every single week.
A week is every week.
Every week is a week. Every week it's the same. Next week will be better. Next week comes. It's not better. It's just different.
Yeah. But you just got to roll with the punches.
I feel like everybody's punching us.
Sometimes I can roll. Sometimes I can't.
Sometimes I punch myself.
Yeah. Like, the struggle is real with business stuff. But the way I see it is, like, when you own a business, this just, like, comes with the territory sometimes. So we're just, like, problem solving and doing our best, as always.
I would say there's, like, a normal amount of...
Yeah, for sure. But, like, there's going to be, like, issues that come up that are bigger than the usual business issues. It's just, like, there's a risk to owning a business. And, like, you have agreements with people and people aren't good people. And, like, stuff happens. And, yeah, it'll be okay.
Didn't cause it, still your responsibility.
But a funny story. So, given some of the, like, stress that we're under, like, non-normal stress, we're a little on edge. And the other night, like, explains exactly the situation.
Well,
that we're
like,
in.
we've both been having just, like, periodic, I don't want to call them breakdowns, but just, like, moments where you need to lay, like, flat on the floor and stare at the ceiling, or go have a nap at 2 p.m. Or, like,
you
maybe
extricate yourself from the situation of life for a moment.
Mentally.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are tears. Sometimes it's more like a sort of comatose state.
Sometimes it's anger.
But, like, we seem to be sort of, like, we're not overlapping. So it's like, I would say every other day. So, like, you have your day and then, like, I'll have my day the next day. And so we're just kind of, like, back and forth in this state of, like, consoling the other person. And then 12 hours later, roles reverse.
Yeah.
And that's
it's weird.
Kind of been the emotional roller coaster that we're on.
But the other day we were sleeping. It was 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And you were, like, coughing again.
I had a tickle.
Okay, but you're not sick. You just had a cough.
Yeah, it was weird. And I woke up sort of aware that I had, like, been coughing. Like, there was awareness that the cough that woke me up was not the first one.
So, like, I wake up because you're coughing.
Sorry.
It's fine. It happens. You get out of bed to go to the bathroom.
Well, first I reached over and quietly, like, I just started, like...
No, it wasn't quiet. It wasn't quiet. Getting the cough medicine out.
Like, basically, I was like...
It was like... You know when you're on an airplane and the person behind you has a bag of chips?
And they're trying to open it quietly?
No, and they're not trying to open it quietly? Okay, well, whatever. I could hear it through my earplug, so it wasn't that quiet. And I was already awake.
I, like, put it in my mouth and it's probably, like, clicking around my teeth.
Okay, so anyways, you get up and go to the bathroom.
I do.
So I'm like, well, I have to pee now that I'm awake. I'll just give Meredith a minute to get back to bed. But, like, then you didn't come back to bed. So I'm like, maybe she left. Like, maybe she's not sleeping and she, like, left the bedroom and is downstairs. So then I get up to go to the bathroom and it's dark and you're sitting on the toilet. And I'm like, has she been sitting on the toilet? Like, I waited longer than a minute.
Yeah, it was.
So I was like, probably like 3 minutes. I'm like, has Meredith been sitting on the toilet for 3 minutes? And it's weird because, like, you didn't have your phone in your hand.
No.
You're just sitting on the toilet in the dark.
Yeah.
And so I say, and okay, so this is an important part of the story. We're both wearing earplugs. So I say, with my earplugs in and with Meredith's earplugs in, like, can I pee? And you
said it like, you got to say it right. You said, can I pee? Like that.
Well, yeah, because I was like, okay, honestly, disturbed that you had been sitting on the toilet that long.
Well, like,
I know. Okay.
As my wife, you should say, are you okay? That would be a normal response.
Okay. I was a little miffed that I was woken up by your coughing. So there's like that.
Yeah.
So I say in a rude way, can I pee? You turn your head and you pull up your pants. Like you didn't even wipe.
I hadn't peed yet.
You just like pulled your pants up. Like it was like so fast. And I just like peed. And then you're standing there like with your arms crossed, like in front of me. And I'm like, did I do something? Like no one has taken their earplugs out.
Alex, you're not even delivering your lines right. I'm like standing there waiting because I was trying to pee. And you said, did I do something? Like that. You got to do that.
And then you said, I don't even know what you said.
I think I said, I was trying to pee.
Yeah, that's what you said. So then I just go back to bed.
No, I think you said on the way out something along the lines of like, it shouldn't take 5 minutes to pee or something.
Yeah, maybe something along those lines. Sounds like
still
me.
like
it was 2 a.m. I don't know.
Earplugs are in still.
Yeah, everyone still has their earplugs in. So you can like hear each other, but it's really muffled.
It's
so
like, did I say something? I don't know if that was muffled, but it was supposed to be muffled.
Yeah, I think most people have had earplugs in. So anyways, I go back to bed and then you come back to bed and you say something, but I ignore it.
I said, I wasn't sitting on the toilet for 5 minutes.
Okay, so I didn't hear that. Well, I did, but I didn't hear what you said. And I didn't want to ask again or take my earplugs out.
Because it was 2 a.m. and you thought to yourself, maybe we shouldn't be having an argument.
Yeah, so I go back to bed, but I'm the person that like, I can't go to bed angry because it gets worse overnight. So I get up in the morning, like maybe an hour before you, and then you come down and you like smile at me. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, how dare she? And so I just look at you and I'm like, are you going to apologize?
To which I think I said, are you going to apologize?
Apparently what had happened is you weren't on the toilet for all those minutes.
No,
you were digging for cough medicine.
Finding cough syrup.
So that made a lot of sense because I was like, what could you be doing on the toilet trying to pee for 5 minutes?
I found the cough syrup finally. I took it and then I thought to myself, I should pee.
Yeah.
And like, as you know, if you try to pee, but you don't really have to pee, which to me is like a panic pee. Like I want to pee so it doesn't wake me up. It takes some time to like work it up.
It takes a literal minute, apparently. So anyways, we kind of were able to get ourselves out of that quickly, being like, okay, we started a fight wearing earplugs at 2 a.m. Maybe like we should just move past that.
I love how you're using the word we.
You woke the beast.
You started
You literally woke the beast.
You could have practiced some acceptance and you didn't. 2 a.m.
Okay. Anyways, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And that's not the only time we've argued with or without earplugs in.
It's usually over dumb shit.
It is. It's just because we're like, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. Every straw is breaking our back. We're the camel. But anyways, you get back up, your 4 legs collapse. If you're a camel, you get back up and you say, I'm strong enough to handle one more straw, but only one more. And if you keep doing that over and over again, you just accumulate a lot of straws. And that's how stress works. You can manage more than you ever thought.
Yeah.
You just got to keep moving forward. Keep problem solving, keep caring. And eventually somebody will brush all those straws off your back and you will ride off into the sunset.
I can't wait for that.
But one of the straws yesterday, so Rue had her situation with the moose, which I guess didn't get posted.
We'll still talk about that at some point.
Okay, so it was a moose incident with Rue. Then Mel had dental surgery on Thursday, which was concerning because she's like recently had a seizure. And so we didn't know exactly why. And so like putting someone under anesthesia after a seizure was scary for me because like we don't know what was going on. Anyway, she makes it through surgery. And then yesterday the cleaner was here and the cleaner like leaves and we come into the house like 30 minutes after the cleaner leaves. And we're like,
we would have come in sooner except for having an argument in the garage.
Yeah, and another argument. So we come in and we're like, hey, let's like get back to work. You're on your computer and I come up and I always look for the cats like when I come home because usually they're in the places I usually see them. And like, I don't see Mel. And so I was like, have you seen Mel? And you were like, no.
Yeah.
So we both kind of get up and I start looking and you open a can of food because the can of food always gets Mel to come.
Because her name is the sound, like her actual name is a can of food opening.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
She loves food. So Ivy comes running up the stairs for food and Mel doesn't come. And I feel bad for Ivy because the disappointment on our faces must have been just awful for her to see when she ran up.
Yeah, she was like, wait, what?
But it's because Mel didn't show. So I start panicking and looking like literally everywhere in the house. Like I was looking in drawers because I'm like, I don't know where she could be. Everywhere. Like then I call the cleaner being like, did you see the orange cat? And she's like, oh no, but I was like cleaning off the rugs outside and left the door open. And I'm like, Mel got outside. But then part of me was like, no way.
Yeah.
Mel wouldn't be outside. Like she's an inside kitty. She's never been outside. Like, no, the cleaner did not let the cat out. Like we have told her almost every single time she's come over, like the cats are here. Watch for the cats. Like,
yeah.
Anyways, we are searching high and low for Mel, outside, inside. Like I went in outside, you came inside to continue to look. I was walking around the neighborhood clacking like a can of food.
Yeah.
Trying to get her to come. And at one point, like I came around like down the road and you were like, I think I heard something.
Well, I think I asked if you had like been in the area behind our condo and like said something because I thought that I had heard.
Yeah. And I was just like, I'm looking for Mel. Don't bother me right now.
On a mission.
So then you're like, I'm going to go in. And then you called me and you're like, I found her.
Yeah. But this is a good, like probably, 30 minutes?
She had to have been
minutes?
outside for close to 2 hours.
Easily. Yeah.
By the time like we finished our fight, left the gym. Actually, we weren't done the fight. We were just like on a pause. Like we need to separate for a bit. So obviously that fight got brushed under the rug because something else more important came up, which honestly is maybe a blessing in disguise.
Could be.
So Meredith found her on the neighbor's back deck.
Yeah. So our like back deck where our hot tub is, she must have like walked up the stairs, gotten on top of the hot tub. And then there's this like skinny little walkway where 2 like 6x6 posts are that she must have just like walked over there and hopped down to the neighbor's porch. But their hot tub doesn't butt up against that wall like ours does. So
I'm really glad she didn't try to jump over.
Yeah.
Because had she jumped over, that's like right where the edge is to go over the deck.
I know.
I was looking over the deck at one point to see if there was like a kitty imprint in the snow.
Yeah.
To see if maybe she had like plummeted into the snow.
She's kind of clumsy. Like she's not the most graceful. She falls off of things in the house a lot, like misses jumps.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm glad she didn't miss that one. And she was just like, what? She's like, the food options out here suck. Yeah. She was like pawing at the neighbor's place to get in. When I stood up on top of our hot tub cover and looked over, she was just like staring up at me like, about time, freaking cat.
That was really scary though.
It was pretty.
Because like for a moment, like we live like in forest. Like it's not like, just neighborhoods go forever.
No, like it's, and that's like a main concern is like.
And other animals, like her getting, like she's never been outside. Does she know to come back to the house?
No, she doesn't. There's like, we're in a little bit of a neighborhood, but there's literal, like we back up to wilderness.
Yeah. Anyway, that was stressful. But Mel lived another day and so did we.
9 lives.
But to the point of the podcast.
Oh yeah. So we've been
coping with alcohol. No, I'm kidding.
Well, we've been talking about doing this one and we've had it requested a lot because I think we discuss it sort of in passing. It's, we'll allude to it on Instagram posts. But it's the topic of alcohol consumption and, some of the effects and a little bit about it. And to be honest, like I've been dragging my feet on this one because Andrew Huberman did a podcast on alcohol, maybe, I think it's been over a year now. I think that one may have been published towards the end of 2022. And it's great. Like as far as the science goes, if you want to understand in more specific terms, some of the health impacts and how alcohol, like from a mechanistic standpoint, affects the body, that's the one to listen to because he has points to research. He speaks about, the data in a very understandable way. And, I don't know that we need to rehash every single thing that he says, but it's a great podcast if you are inspired to listen to something else after listening to ours. So yeah, alcohol has been consumed by humans for like basically forever, like Mesopotamia. It goes way back. So I guess the first distillers of alcohol were the Chinese. And I only say that, and this is from Huberman's podcast, but I've also heard that the Irish sort of make claim that they're the first distillers of alcohol, but that's not accurate. It was Chinese. But yeah, it goes way back. And what's interesting, and we can talk about this a little bit later, is, alcohol is not the only, we'll call it an illicit substance that humans have a history of consuming. I mean, opium was really widely consumed for a very long time. And
love a good poppy seed bagel.
Yeah, right. But obviously there's plenty of opioid derivatives that are banned, that are legal, you can't possess them. And we have really harsh rules and regulations on like how they're consumed and how they're used. And that's only one example. Cocaine has been used for a long time, chewed in its kind of leaf form. Like there's all this history of humans consuming stimulants, depressants, narcotics in more natural forms, in their more whole forms for many thousands of years. And alcohol is the one that has kind of prevailed and exists most commonly in our society and is most, I would say, normalized in the Western world. And just find that interesting. So there's 3 types of alcohol. There's methanol, isopropyl alcohol, and ethanol. And ethanol is the only one that's suitable for human consumption. The other 2 are poisons, and ethanol is also a poison, but the other 2 are more immediately impactful. Isopropyl alcohol is actually used in many labs and in medical facilities for cleaning because it immediately denatures and kills bacteria. It disrupts cell membranes and acts more, immediately and not so dissimilar a way as ethanol. So, ethanol might be suitable for human consumption, but it's still a poison in high enough quantity and with enough frequency. Methanol is sometimes created by error in distillation processes. So when people are, moonshining or doing at home brewing or something like that, you can accidentally produce methanol and that can cause some issues. It can cause blindness. So that's the more dangerous type. So ethanol, when you consume it, is converted to acetaldehyde in the body, which is that compound that's highly associated with hangovers. That's what actually causes that. And it's converted by an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. And alcohol dehydrogenase, I guess not everyone produces that enzyme or in a significant quantity, and that can impact your tolerance to alcohol. So there's some people who just have no tolerance for alcohol at all. They have an aversion to the taste. Even small amounts can cause them to be really sleepy, groggy. It can cause them to get sick immediately. And their ability to produce that enzyme is likely associated with that.
I feel like in reading this, I learned that. And it's very person dependent.
Yeah.
And as you said, genetic.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you ever think, wow, it would be cool to meet up and hang with the tactic coaches and community? Does the idea of bagels and shakeout runs and hangouts with me, Alex, Lindsay, and the rest of our crew and community excite you? Maybe even signing up and running a race with your fellow tackies? That's a fun nickname for our community members. I didn't run that by Alex though, so I don't know. Maybe it will stick. Well, then we have just the thing for you. We are doing a spring meetup that corresponds with the Calgary Marathon. It will be May 24th through 26th in Calgary, Alberta, Alex's hometown and my adopted city. We have a full weekend of events scheduled starting on Friday afternoon with a meetup at the Stampede grounds, culminating in the running of the Calgary Marathon, half marathon, 10K, or 5K, or 60K if you're into that kind of thing. And of course, a formal group dinner on Sunday night. We did this for the Philly Marathon, but we are making it bigger and better this time around. You can sign up right from our website, but we'll make sure to drop a link in the show notes of this episode. We hope to see you there. It is going to be really, really fun.
I wonder, have you read anything about there being you produce more or less? You obviously can become more tolerant to it.
Yep.
Is that on account of being able to produce more of the enzyme?
There's a lot that goes into alcohol tolerance. Yes, I would say that's one of 10 things. So I
wonder type of alcohol too, or I guess there's so many factors, what else you're drinking, what have you eaten?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. And the nitrates, the impurities in alcohol. A lot of people think that alcohol that's high in sugar or alcohol that's combined with sugar is the worst for not only intoxication, but also hangovers. And that's not really the case. So they've ranked alcohols because they've actually studied this, which alcohols cause the most severe hangovers. The worst one is brandy. And that's, again, people are because it's high in sugar. It is, but at the bottom of the list is ethanol combined with orange juice, which is also very high in sugar, but it doesn't cause the same hangovers. So we can kind of isolate.
I've had some pretty bad hangovers from screwdrivers.
Well, that's like champagne, right?
I thought screwdrivers was vodka and orange juice.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I was thinking
Because it feels, do you think it's
mimosas.
called a screwdriver because it feels like someone's screwing a screwdriver into your head the next day?
Could be. Although vodka by itself is quite low on the
Are
list.
clear liquids better from a hangover
There's no
standpoint?
correlation. Yeah. The correlation is the presence of impurities and nitrates, things like that.
So would more expensive alcohol technically be better?
No, I mean, there's very expensive brandies out there. Yeah. What makes alcohol expensive is, I mean, we could go into the economics of that, but mostly it's how large is the producer? Like what size are their batches? And then is it an alcohol that has to be aged? So you look at an alcohol like Scotch, where they're aging it potentially for like up to 60 years and producing it in small batches. Like that's how you end up spending $500 on a bottle of Scotch. Is a $500 bottle of Scotch less likely to cause a hangover? No. But you look at alcohols like a tequila, for example, where, you know, even the longest aged tequila, like the oldest one, may be like 10 years, maybe less. Those are going to be less expensive generally. They're still very expensive tequilas. And as you know, tequila can give you a righteous headache.
I feel like all alcohols give me a headache.
Yeah.
It's like really just like, well, headache is an understatement.
Your dad can't handle certain alcohols, right?
Yeah, like he could drink Coors Light literally all day, which he has before, but he can't have a bottle of white wine.
Yeah, it's weird.
I can't have anything.
You can't have anything.
I can have like one, maybe two over the course of time, but if I like go to a party and I have like 3, 4 or plus, it's like disastrous the next day, like throwing up.
Yeah.
And it's a 12-hour situation.
Yeah.
At least. Like it's the full next day, I'm in bed.
I mean, I haven't seen you drunk very often, and our wedding was like shocking.
But I'm a really fun drunk. And I don't want to tell people that like drinking is good, but like, I don't know.
So the correlation, and again, this is coming from Huberman's podcast. You can listen to him talk about this more. The people who, when they consume alcohol, become more outgoing and they seem to get a boost in energy and it makes them happier. You know, they can kind of stay up longer if they don't want to go to bed. Those are the people who are at the highest risk of developing alcohol dependency.
But also, isn't there a correlation between people who are better at or have less severe negative impact the following day, also more likely to be an alcoholic?
I don't know that correlation exists.
I read that in that one article that you sent me.
Oh, then it does. Yeah, it could be. There's probably a lot that goes into that. But a lot of people get into the pattern of chasing that feeling. And also you can consume alcohol to quote unquote get rid of a hangover. So you can kind of just like stay
Hair of the dog.
Yeah. What does that mean?
I don't know. I'll look it up.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that goes into alcohol dependency, and that's not what we'll talk about. But age when you start drinking is a big one. There's obviously a genetic component if you are not necessarily like related to someone, but if you're around people who have drinking problems as a kid, you're more likely to develop them because they see when you separate kids or when, you know, a kid with parents or relatives who have alcohol dependency problems grows up in a home where that doesn't happen, or they themselves start drinking at a later age, they are no more likely to develop it than someone who isn't related to addicts.
Okay. So this is what dictionary.com said. Originally, the expression referred to a method of treating a rabid dog bite. Hair from the dog was placed in the wound.
Interesting.
So in that sense, having another drink, any drink, is like taking hair from the dog that bit you.
Huh. I have never heard that.
Well, there you go. You learned something new on this podcast.
Thank you.
Bet you Huberman didn't tell you that.
No, he didn't. Okay, let's get into health risks, health effects really quick. And again, if you want to learn more about this, go listen to the neuroscientist. But like there are well-known health risks, and like probably the most significant one is an increase in cancer risks, particularly breast cancer in women, because alcohol consumption changes DNA methylation and gene expression. So you see a 4 to 13% increase in cancer risk with every 10 grams of alcohol consumed on average per day, which in the US is between 7 and 10 properly poured drinks per week. And it doesn't matter when they say like 10 grams on average per day. If you have 7 drinks on a Saturday, that still contributes to that average and would put you at the same increased risk. So
it doesn't matter if it's spread out during the week.
Right.
So like if you're somebody who drinks 2 drinks every night at dinner, like because you enjoy glasses of wine with cooking, that may not seem as bad as somebody who goes out and binge drinks on Saturday night with their friends and has 7 to 14 drinks, but it is as bad.
A person who has 2 drinks per night, or even 1 drink if it's a larger one, would be considered a chronic drinker. So chronic it sounds bad, but all it really is defining is the frequency, not the volume of consumption. So that particular cancer data has been known since the mid 80s. So like that's been around a while. And obviously like we see increased impulsive behavior and impaired decision making. So, people who drink are more likely to put themselves and others in direct risk of injury and of harm. So regular drinking, even if people only drink on the weekends, if you're like a, Friday, Saturday, Sunday drinker, can lead to changes in neural circuits in the brain, making impulsive, sober behavior more likely. So it actually can influence your non-intoxicated decision-making in a negative way. There's impact to CVD risk, so cardiovascular disease, and there could be some correlation to the dietary patterns that you see in people who drink a lot. Because as you know, it's not uncommon to see people, go out to a pub and have 3, 4, 5 beers and then a burger and fries or fish and chips or ribs or all of these other things that are also associated with increased CVD risk. So it's
like alcohol affects your decision-making process. So you're maybe more likely to choose unhealthy option,
right? Which
would then correlate with the health risks also associated with alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of feedback loops here. And that's the tricky thing about alcohol specifically.
Will it impact your sleep cycle?
100%.
Sleep, yeah.
Personally, like the thing that I struggle with the most with alcohol is sleep. And we have a beer a week. That's like
this isn't a non-alcohol space. We do enjoy a drink once in a while.
Right. But even so let's say we go to dinner at 7 or like 7:30. If my goal is to go to bed at 9 or 9:30, it's not happening. Even when I do go to sleep, it's a bad sleep. And I notice that every single time.
Really?
Even with one beer. Yep.
I actually do okay with one beer. If I have 1.5.
Yeah.
And I always order the same beer. It's really the only beer I like. 1.5 does me in. And I feel it the next day.
Yeah. Interesting. The sleep thing is probably the biggest, if you were to look at the impacts on an acute level, like not talking CVD risk, not talking cancer, we're talking about feedback loops that make other habits more or less likely. The thing that I think is the most impactful with alcohol, regular alcohol consumption, is the impact to sleep and the impact that poor sleep has on health-seeking activities in the days following. So if you're underslept or you're not getting good quality sleep, and a lot of people don't even realize they're not getting good quality sleep. A lot of people have a drink to sleep. The quality of sleep that you get after you drink is not good. So the next day, what are you probably not going to want to do? Probably not going to want to get up early and exercise. It becomes a lot easier to push that off. You may not want to get up early and prepare your meals for the day. So like motivation for positive behaviors is lower. It gets a little easier to let things go. And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, I'm just really stressed because, drinking increases anxiety. And also it can be anxiety inducing to kind of like consistently miss the mark on health seeking activities that you really want to do on a level. And so you have a drink.
Yeah. And then Lindsay talked about this on a podcast, maybe last year, how impactful sleep can be on your like hunger hormones.
Yeah.
And actually, if you're underslept, you're more likely to feel hungry.
Yeah.
Like it's good to know this. It can be helpful to have that awareness.
Yeah.
But you wake up, you're underslept because of alcohol, you're going to eat more. And you also, if you're hungover, you're going to seek certain foods to make you feel better.
Well, alcohol increases cortisol and high levels of cortisol correlate to poor eating patterns and poor decisions with food. Comfort foods. So I mean, look, feedback loops all over the place here. Alcohol consumption.
It's like, that like foundation of health pyramid where it's like the bottom is sleep and then it's like, I don't know, exercise, life, like,
literally everything.
And then at the bottom you have like supplements or something, like something small. At the bottom, you have to be like low alcohol intake because that's underneath sleep.
Well, you just have to do everything that you can to take care of sleep.
Yeah.
And like alcohol, sure. It is. There's also a ton of other things.
Yeah, of course. Sleep, I guess it's not really a pyramid. It's more just like a Venn diagram of all these like overlapping circles.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Especially with sleep.
Yeah.
It impacts estrogen and testosterone production in men and women. And that's our sex hormone. It's our feel good hormone. Makes you want to push in the gym. It makes you feel good. It makes you like,
impacts sleep.
It also impacts sleep. It can cause gynecomastia in men. So like
tissue boobs.
Yes.
Well, sorry, how are you going to say it?
Man boobs. It's like this tissue formation under the nipple.
Yeah.
You see it a lot in people who use steroids because it causes aromatization. And then obviously decrease in sex drive if you're not producing those hormones. And like, that sucks. It impacts so prefrontal cortex part of the brain. That's our future thinking. It's making good decisions for our global benefit in the long term. It impacts that. So future thinking kind of goes out the window, and it impacts the hypothalamus. So no future thinking, higher pleasure seeking. You can kind of see where that goes.
So this would be like something that we have talked about on the podcast, which is like instant gratification versus delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Instant gratification doesn't really get you anywhere.
Right. And this
except
is
for like where you don't want to be.
Right. And, one of the things that I will occasionally hear from people is like, well, I'm planning on not drinking a whole lot this weekend. So when I'm out, I'm just going to I'm going to cool it. And, when I start to feel it, I'm going to stop. I'm like, are you? Because there's that saying, like, you have a drink, then the drink has a drink, then the drink has you. Mm-hmm. And that's really accurate because, you get to the point where you're buzzed and that prefrontal cortex is already impacted. So that commitment that you made when you were sober, because you have in mind your long-term goals and where you want to go and where you want to be, even the next day, that part of your brain is offline. It's gone. And so making that decision because you want to feel good tomorrow or you want to stay committed to this thing that you set out, that's really hard.
Yeah.
I don't love that line of thinking. I don't think it works very well for people. And we'll talk about that more later. One of the bigger issues with alcohol consumption is the gut microbiome and the impact that it has on that. And that is impacted even by small amounts of alcohol. So remember, at the beginning, we talked about isopropyl alcohol and how it's used as really a sterilization tool to kill bacteria. Well, in your gut, there's also bacteria and there's microbes. And even though ethanol is not as potent an alcohol and it doesn't denature in the exact same way and at the exact same intensity, it still does. And essentially, alcohol consumption kills those microbes. And what we know, there's been loads of studies and research emerging on the gut-brain axis. So this like bidirectional feedback loop between your stomach and your brain and, most specifically the impact on serotonin production, which goes to mental health. And that's not to say that, eating fibrous foods and taking probiotics can prevent mental health disorders because it can't, but there certainly does seem to be an impact. And so you disrupt that and you see then alcohol consumption via this dysbiosis impacts serotonin levels in the brain. And so now we're talking about that. What we see the incidence of increased anxiety in people who consume alcohol, not even in high amounts. And that dysbiosis and that serotonin pathway is probably at work there. And so you combine that with elevated cortisol levels. So now you're feeling a little anxious and less happy because serotonin's impacted. Your stress levels are higher because you have higher levels of cortisol. And, a lot of people will then drink to help with anxiety. But in drinking to help with anxiety, you feed back into the loop of creating anxiety. And so this is what gets a lot of people stuck in daily drinking is, I just need it to wind down. I need it to calm down from the day without understanding how alcohol is really potentially underlying their anxiety.
It's
or
compounding.
Making it worse.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the pathways that scientists think may be involved with that. Even if not, like the qualitative data on that is compelling enough to say, even if we're not quite sure on the exact mechanism or which pathway is most influential, the data is solid and it's pretty telling. And then inflammation in the body caused by chronic drinking. And again, chronic drinking is not necessarily high volume. It's just frequent, can increase the desire to drink. And again, that's kind of like getting into that, not necessarily addictive pathway, but, sort of increasing the likelihood and the desire to drink on a more frequent basis. We'll stop there for a second. The obvious question, and this is what people will ask, and sometimes, you'll have articles or you'll hear that there are positive effects to alcohol. So I wanted to see.
What about the antioxidants in red wine?
Resveratrol?
That's a question along those lines.
For sure. So resveratrol has been studied. It might have positive health impacts, antioxidative impacts, and that's a maybe. There's not enough data to say that it definitely does. The issue with resveratrol, when we're consuming it from a source like red wine, is the amount that you'd have to consume to reach an effective dose of resveratrol. The amount of red wine that you'd have to consume would greatly
negate any positive benefits.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that article that you read on yahoo.com, Brenda.
Yeah. Was probably propaganda from alcohol lobbyists and actors, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you hear, social anxiety. Like you do hear people who kind of rely on it to help them loosen up in new environments. And I'm sure you've also benefited from that yourself in ways. I would say it's heavily relied on in like the corporate world. This was a big reason why you left the corporate law field.
Yeah. I mean, there was pressure to drink and pressure to, drink. Like it was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, it got to a point where like everyone kind of knew that I didn't drink, which was good. I did drink a little because like sometimes I would just have something to sip on to like not have to deal with the like comments.
Yeah.
But that definitely had an impact in building relationships with my coworkers and peers for sure, which was unfortunate. And maybe if I was a different person and I didn't drink, then maybe it wouldn't have. But for me, it did. And there were other factors too, but yeah.
I mean, I work with enough people who are in the corporate world, like, you know, they go to conferences and like I've been to plenty of these conferences that like really a lot of them do turn into kind of like drinking fests and eating fests. And, you know, there is a big component of alcohol consumption in these like networking events and things like that.
It's a huge social component in certain environments.
You know, big expensive bottles of wine, you know, things like that. I bet a lot of people drink who don't want to drink. I bet there's kind of this pressure and everyone feels it. And I wonder if like, if someone were to just break the cycle, if that would have any impact at all.
I honestly, and maybe we'll get into this, like, I do think it's starting with all the non-alcoholic beverages available for people.
Yeah.
And like you can have a beer and it not be a thing. It's easy to have a can in your hand and people not really notice. It's uncomfortable to stand there without anything in your hand. I think that's also why some people opt for a drink. And I think also like bartenders always for some reason give you like a big ass glass when you order something that's not alcohol.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can you just put this in one of those like
low balls?
Yeah.
Like they always give it to you in like a 20-ounce tumbler.
It's like, why don't you put this in a, what do you call those, like 7-Eleven cups?
Yeah, Slurpee cup with a dome lid.
And like, can you put some lights around my neck that say like party pooper as well so that, you know, people know?
Lame. Yeah. How do you deal with clients on the topic of alcohol?
When I first started coaching, well, number one, I think any coach, you're a little bit biased by how you respond to certain things or how you interact with certain foods or certain things like alcohol. And when I was an athlete in CrossFit, I very rarely drank.
Yeah.
And I was also a different coach back then. I was somebody who was more of a problem solver. And like I would set goals for people. Like I always thought like, okay, let's try to get, you know, the limit in my mind was 3 drinks per week for literally anybody. And it's tough when somebody does work a corporate job and they're going out for dinners and they travel and all that. So like 3 drinks for them was just not doable. And the problem with setting a goal for somebody else, and this is a bigger topic, is that like, if it's not doable for them, they're not even going to try. And that's understandable. So I think the way that I handle it now is I look at what somebody is currently doing. And that might be, you know, 8 to 10 drinks a week. First, I say, how do you feel about that? Because they might say like, I'm actually fine with that right now. I want to focus on something else.
Yep.
So I'm not going to like harp on them regarding the alcohol situation. I will bring it up eventually and say like, this is something that I think would be very beneficial. Are you open to changing?
Yeah.
And most of the time people are because they sign up because they want to improve their health and they know that this is a low hanging fruit. So then I'll say, you know, you take event by event. So it's like, okay, where you're going out on vacation or you're going to this concert. Like what would feel successful for you? What have you done in the past if not thinking about it? Okay, well, I probably have like 6 or 7 beers. Okay, so how would you feel about doing like 3 or 4? Okay, that seems doable. Or like they might straight up say like, actually, I think I could only just do 1 and be okay with that.
Yeah.
And it's really just working towards it. You know, sometimes you can get someone to commit to a non-alcoholic month as a bit of an experiment. Like people say like, oh, dry January is so stupid because like, you know, what happens in February? Well, dry January can be a really great way to be like, wow, I feel a lot better.
Well, I think it also creates a little space so that people can start to assess the, like, how does alcohol actually serve me and fit into my life? And what is it doing for me? And maybe it's not doing what you think
like
it's doing.
Maybe going to dinner and saying, I'm not drinking isn't as hard as you thought it was.
Yeah.
So I think it's like experimenting, it's asking questions, it's making sure that the alcohol that someone's drinking is serving them. And sometimes it is. Like sometimes somebody really wants a beer at the Hill and that's something they really value. Who am I to say, no, you can't have that? And they understand the negative impacts and that's their decision. Everyone we work with is an adult. So I would say that's how we work with people. It's like understanding like the impact and telling people about it if asked and bringing it up to them and say like, I know you've got these health goals. Here's something I think could help.
Yeah. I do typically get to the point where I don't like to shame anybody because I know it's a complicated topic for a lot of people and it's misunderstood. But like my personal experience working with clients, I have never seen anyone have success, the type of success that they want, while maintaining an alcohol habit that exceeds 4 drinks per week.
Yeah.
That's the number for me. If you're like under that,
I usually say we want to limit to 3 in every plan that I send out.
yeah. And we can like make strides, take small steps to get there, but you can't often make great strides in health improvements and fitness and nutrition while also maintaining that kind of a habit because they oppose.
I think a lot of people who come to track, like when they start with us and we ask them to track if they're comfortable, they realize how alcohol impacts, number one, their calorie intake. And then with that, what that impact has on the other food that they consume.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if you're, like we said, it can impact your decision making. But if you're trying to fit in 2 alcoholic beverages per day, we usually count it as carbs. So let's say it's 80 grams of carbs, 300 to 400 calories.
And that would be on the low side.
And you're on a deficit. So let's say you're eating 1,700 calories a day as a female, then that only leaves 1,300 calories for actual food.
Which probably isn't going to happen.
No, that's not going to feel good. So often you end up drinking over and above that because like you need to eat. Or maybe you don't eat one day and then the next day you're really hungry. Well, I wonder why. And I think seeing that can help deter people. Or like I have people log alcohol as Coca-Cola because it's about the same. A can of beer is 140 calories. A can of Coke is 140 calories. People like, first of all, they don't like giving their carbs up. 40 carbs is a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people actually view pop or like soda in a more negative light than a beer.
Which is crazy.
So it can be a real deterrent when they have to log Coke.
Yeah.
More so than logging a glass of wine, which
Yeah.
is wild because
like,
alcohol is a poison.
Yeah. I mean, it's still contributing calories, but like alcohol is empty calories.
Yeah.
At least with a Coke, you're getting some carbs that your body will use.
Yeah, for energy.
Yeah.
So I would say like, it's almost like we slowly help people move away from that over time from a number of different ways.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Always. So, I kind of wanted to talk about on this podcast that differentiated a bit from Huberman's is to spend some time on the alcohol industry's influence on policy regarding alcohol sale, consumption, all that stuff. When you look at, okay, what makes alcohol different than like the opioid industry? Well, the alcohol industry has been heavily involved in politics and policymaking and the economics of the US and many other countries forever. And so, like many industries, and I'm not going to say that the alcohol industry is the only industry doing lobbying and having influence, but they certainly do position themselves as like key stakeholders in policymaking with regards to tackling the negative impacts of the harms of alcohol, which when you think about it is a huge conflict of interest. And so like they do this in a few different ways. So they kind of position themselves as these key economic players, like, they help generate income. They generate tax revenue for the government. They provide jobs. There's all these talking points. And ironically, they're the same talking points that the tobacco industry relied on for a long time because the tobacco industry is like, we have farmers, we have manufacturing facilities, we're key influencers of the economics. But with tobacco, like it just got to a point where everybody's like, look, this stuff is so negative. Like we have to do something. Alcohol is headed that way.
I mean, if you talk about government money, okay, they're bringing in government money, but the health impacts are so disastrous that then, I mean, at least for Canada, the government's now paying for people's medical bills.
Yeah. Health Canada came out with like these very stern alcohol recommendations and people just kind of like lost their marbles over that. They're 2 drinks a week. Yes, 2 drinks a week. That's the Health Canada recommendation. No more, which is a good recommendation in my opinion. So these industry actors, they claim to be unbiased, responsible. They claim to help. A lot of times you'll see their involvement with like philanthropic organizations. And you see this like, Bud Light with what's the person's name? I can't remember their name, but they sort of do good things, right? And it's to create this image of, we care about people. They put an overemphasis on like, well, we're a legal industry and there are plenty of illegal industries that are causing harm. And they do a lot of work to differentiate themselves from the tobacco industry. So they're trying to create space, I think, because they see the writing on the wall. They sort of position people who oppose alcohol or who are proponents of more restrictions. They work hard to sort of paint them as like these neo-prohibitionists and extremists and undermined their sort of credibility in the space. So there's a shift, and this is an interesting one. They tend to try to shift the problem towards the individual. So instead of taking any responsibility as the industry, they say, no, the alcohol is fine. People can drink responsibly. The issue is the small minority of people who have drinking problems, who can't handle their booze. They're the problem. without taking ownership of the fact that alcohol is just really, really easy to get and marketed towards minors. And a lot of minors start drinking at really young age, which predicts alcohol dependency as adults. The resveratrol thing, that was promoted by alcohol companies. That's how that ended up in the news. So there's sort of this subtle influence, like alcohol has positive effects. It can be beneficial for health. Like they are sort of planting these sort of fringe beliefs and completely ignoring the like very evident harms and compelling data that exists that actually support that there are real health problems.
To go back a little bit, I didn't read the study. I read an article that referenced a study that said very small to moderate intake of alcohol, like 1 to 2 per week, in one study showed that it can actually increase lifespan by 1 year. But if you go over and above that at all, it actually decreases lifespan by 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Like part of me wonders if there is an aspect to drinking. It's kind of like the same as we talk about with certain like non-nutritious foods.
Yeah.
It does kind of help with like socialization. It's a community bonding.
Yeah.
You know, it's celebratory. And I wonder if like, you know, 1 beer per week or every couple of days, that can help like in a way combat some of the negative impacts of 1 to 2 drinks a week in a different way. Like it's just
what I think is probably more likely. I hear that it could be. I think that it is equally as likely. If you look at a person who restricts their drinking to 1 drink per week, maybe 2, what are they doing with the rest of their diet?
They're probably mindful in other ways.
Right. And so it's the whole red
You're
meat.
such a smarty pant.
Alex, stop it. But it's the whole red meat increases risk of, you know, heart disease, heart attack. Well, how are we consuming red meat?
Yeah.
What are we eating it with? Are we eating it with French fries? Or are we eating it with steamed broccoli? So I think we need to decouple some other factors before we could really say like,
You're
you know,
a real scientist at heart.
Alex, you got to look at the variables. That study sounds like it lacks a little bit of control.
Well, I didn't read the study. I saw the line and I was like, hey,
but like that's,
I'm really just trying to justify my Friday beer.
You can't, like, that's fine. I do think that is the industry's move though. And that's kind of how they look at data. They're like, oh, but look at this. And it's like, people just take that at surface level and they don't.
Dummies.
You're fine. You know, you don't think about like, what else could this possibly mean? Or what else could we possibly be looking at here? So yeah, so it's, you know, it's interesting. And these sort of industry influencers tend to definitely oppose any kind of regulation on price, marketing, tax increases in minimum age purchasing, you know, anything that makes alcohol more expensive, harder to get, and more upfront with the harms, like labeling that highlights some of the health risks.
Why do you think Canada's age limit is 18 and US is 21?
I've always wondered that.
Which is odd because if Canada has more strict recommendations, you would think that maybe the limit would be higher.
My guess is it probably is related to the religion aspect in the US.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Could be. Right, because church and state aren't actually separate there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I would guess that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I find that the conflict of interest and like the influence to be a little bit ironic because people will get their panties in a big old wad over pharmaceutical industries funding research and contributing to grants and things like that. And, you know, having influence over policy. Same thing with oil and gas companies influencing environmental policy, things like that. People get obviously upset and for good reason sometimes on that. But this is kind of one that we're willing to look past or justify. And you know, I think that alcohol is behind big tobacco. It's going that way, the tobacco industry. And there was basically an initiative started maybe 10 years ago, not quite, to put in a lot of the same types of restrictions and start shifting public awareness about alcohol. And for tobacco, it took about, I would say, 10 to 15 years for that initiative to really have an effect. And I think that we're kind of getting there. And I think that corresponds with the rise of non-alcoholic beers. And not just beers, non-alcoholic everything.
I think the NA wine situation needs another 10 to 15 years to get up to snuff.
But you're seeing a shift there. And that's becoming a bigger and bigger percentage of the industry, of the market. I think the estimation is by 2027, the non-alcoholic sector could take, you know, as much as like 7 to 8% of the total market, which is huge when you think about it, especially considering not just like a few years ago, it rounded down to 0. And you see tons of options and they're pretty good, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like a couple. We have one every night.
I know.
Except for Friday.
Because we have the real deal on Friday.
Yeah. But they're actually pretty good and enjoyable. And like, yeah, I like it.
Yeah. One of the things that I loved most about the Huberman podcast, and I did some research, I wanted to look up his citations and I wanted to find some of the research that he was looking at. So of course I went to Reddit because that's the best place to go for these things. And the number of people who are actually upset over this episode that he did is shocking. You know, they're saying, well, he's looking at fringe research. He has an anti-alcohol agenda, this and this. And it's probably the same people who are very willing to accept his fringe research on things like cold exposure or
any
caffeine
supplements.
delay,
Yeah.
or supplements. And, you know, how willing are we to accept that he is looking at small data pools, which, by the way, he's typically like pretty open about. But when it comes to like, you know, he's talking about something that is a fixture in their life. Now we're upset. Now we have a problem. Now he has an agenda. Well, he doesn't drink. He doesn't know. He could have been more nuanced. He could have gave more instruction on how to include alcohol in a healthy lifestyle. Well, the fact is, and he doesn't pull punches on this, there is no way to include alcohol in a healthy lifestyle. The number of drinks you should have if you're actually highly concerned with your health is 0.
Yeah.
That is how many drinks you should have in a week. And what I think is really interesting, like Peter Attia takes a stance on alcohol, and his stance is like 7 to 9 drinks a week. He was asked about it recently and he was like, well, first and foremost, I'm not going to drink wine that tastes bad. I was like, what? And he does say you should not drink it within 3 hours of bedtime because it'll impact your sleep and this and this. But I'm like, how interesting is that? This guy whose whole thing right now is on longevity, basically saying it's okay to be an actual literal chronic drinker. Wild.
Yeah.
Anyways, I find people's willingness to argue and resist
I think the word is defend.
Yeah. Defend
their choices and what's important and valuable to them.
Well, you can defend their choices. It's literally, though, it's like resisting data and resisting science. So you can still make that choice. People should make their own choices.
Yeah.
100%. But you can't say that something isn't so when the data says it's so. That's science. Sorry about it. Just how it goes. And these are also the same people who are very willing to watch Netflix documentaries on nutrition and be like, oh, I gotta go vegan.
Yeah.
You know? If anyone went vegan after the twin study and still drinks, we got to have a talk.
Yeah.
Actually, we got to have a talk because
I did have a talk with a couple of my
You may be
clients.
experiencing cognitive dissonance if you watch a Netflix documentary, change your whole diet, and you still drink alcohol.
It is a bit of a tricky one. You know, like people say like, you know, is there anything I should change in my logs? And I'm like, I'm looking at like their vegetables and I'm like, you know, you could add more color. You could add some leafy greens.
Yeah.
Like, of course, there's different ways you can change things up, add variety. But when I see like alcohol logged in there, I'm like,
Especially
we're getting nitty on what vegetables you're eating here. Like there's a big,
like
you know,
1 to 2 drinks per night. And also you have digestive trouble. Well, what can I do to fix my guts? And I'm like, well, we could start by maybe cooling it on the alcohol and see if let's just see if it has an effect.
Yeah.
Let's just see what happens. That's a hard one.
It is. I mean, on that line, there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve other aspects of your life and still enjoy alcohol. But it's like, you know, it's nice to know like that there's awareness there.
Yeah.
Like there's a choice.
I would
and that's
never
okay.
set ultimatums and say
No.
like, you have to get rid of alcohol. I'm not going to talk to you about fiber. Like,
Exactly,
That's ridiculous.
yeah.
And you can actually like make your hangover less severe by consuming prebiotics and probiotics the day after. Like that's one thing that you can do. And it's also very supportive of like, you know, replenishing and recovering some gut health after drinking. I would never say that. But I do think that there's a toggle there that is worth looking at when you have checked a lot of boxes and you're like, hey, what's next? I'm like, well, let's just see how this feels.
I think that most of the people we work with, they're motivated to change their health. And over time, that almost just changes as a result of like feeling better, sleeping better, understanding the impact, like focusing on performance.
Potentially getting into a different social circle.
Yep.
Yeah,
for
you
sure.
spend less time with people.
It just kind of naturally happens. Like I don't actually have the alcohol talk a lot. It's more like events. Like, okay, I'm going to this event. There's going to be drinking.
Yeah.
How can we manage this?
Yeah.
And then, you know, over time. And then some people are like, hey, actually, I want to try not drinking this time. And you're like, okay. Like,
that tickles me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about non-alcoholic options. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's our podcast on alcohol. We hope that you liked it. Again, if you want to hear more of the actual science and the mechanisms and about the, you know, what's happening on a cellular level and in, you know, a neurological level in your brain, go check out Andrew Huberman's podcast.
I want to know how many brain cells I lost in college.
A few, handful. Yeah. It thins your brain. It literally
I know. It makes your brain smaller.
Yeah, it does.
Which is scary.
Crazy. Yeah. Especially for some people who already have small brains. Clearly.
Thankfully, mine was humongous to begin with.
Got a big old
so
brain.
It's still huge.
Yeah. So check out Huberman's podcast on alcohol if you want to learn more about the science. There's loads of information on policies. We'll make sure that we include some links to the meta-analysis that we referenced today.
And the studies I referenced.
The studies that whatever study Alex talked about, which we love. I love you. so much.
That alcohol, I can binge drinking in college.
Yeah, no shit. So anyways, if you like this, share it with friends, subscribe, leave us a rating. We really appreciate that. And we'll catch you on the next one.